tracking for you this evening. India hosted its second edition of the Semicon India Summit over the weekend, which saw not just top global corporates and public stakeholders, but also innovative startups and marquee investors. The event highlighted the massive opportunity homegrown startups have to leverage India's semiconductor ambitions. CNBC-TV18's Shilpa Ranipeta and Yash Jain speak to startups and investors on what this opportunity is and challenges they will have to overcome. Listen in.
Of course, you've heard about India's semiconductor mission. Of course, you've heard about global semiconductor giants like AMD, Foxconn, Micron investing in India's semiconductor sector. But India also has so many domestic startups which are not just looking at driving innovation, but also looking at becoming the next global semiconductor giant made in India.
It's been a roller coaster journey to build a semiconductor startup, and that too from India. As far as production schedules are concerned, we are in such advanced stages of scheduling where we know the chip is going to come out for sure. It's going to come out reliably, safely, performant, but predicting exact schedules at this point is a bit of a scary game. That said, we're planning to get into production by get a prototype out by very early next year, and launch the product as a product by the end of the financial year, if not early the next financial year.
But for you, in the Indian market, what is the market that you're targeting when you say that you're making these chips? And these are, from what I've understood, they don't consume a lot of power, so you're trying to make it more affordable. Correct me if I'm wrong. So for that type of what you're trying to do, what is the market segment that you're targeting?
So if you take any product and open it up, if you see a chip inside and you didn't realize that it was a chip inside, we kind of end up calling it a deep embedded application. Because the chip is so deeply embedded that you don't realize it's there, to the point of you not knowing that, there's a chip inside, iske andar ek chip hai. So that is the class of applications that we are going after to begin with. Why? Because we are a small company, we are little under 2.5 years old, we have a small team. So a small team, logic dictates, can build a small chip. And the small chip is used in all of these places, where consumer appliances, your washing machines, your air conditioners, stuff like that, induction stoves, ovens, refrigerators, all those things. Anything that has the word smart in it has these kinds of chip in it.
For you as a startup so far in your journey, what's been like the biggest challenge?
There are two challenges. There is a technical challenge in actually getting this work done. There is a regulatory challenge in that a lot of the regulations don't even understand what we are doing. Right? They've not been written for what we are. They have to evolve. And it's only by going through the thing that we understand what is there and what needs to be done. And then we need to give feedback to the government. Even with that, money is a challenge, because developing a chip, normally, even a small chip like what we're doing, would take you at least 2-3 years. We have managed to compress that timeline down to just a bit over 1 year.
Right.
And that is... So, if you don't dump money into it, you have to be very careful on how you go to your time to market.
Right.
Because you don't want the chip to become out of date by the time it comes out.
Right.
If you dump money into it, then you have other problems. So, managing that complexity is definitely the biggest challenge. And honestly, it has less to do with semiconductors and more to do with things like supply chain, people management, project management. All of those kind of things are actually more challenging. The tech we can do.
So I think, I was giving an example earlier also. I remember when Maruti was coming to India, and Maruti Suzuki team came to India, the ecosystem and all the spare parts. You remember all these factories in Ludhiana and Punjab. Somebody was making steering, somebody was making the brakes, somebody was making the lights, somebody was making X, Y or Z, right? So I think for us also, it's not that we make all the components, and we can't, right? We need semiconductor companies, we need the Microns of this world to start making products in India so that we can source them easily in here.
Correct.
You don't have to then rely on other companies for countries for other components, right? If you look at us, if you look at the phase manufacturing policy also from the government, it was first you do assembly and then slowly you go into PCBA and the third thing. So it is all, I always say that Rome was not built in a day is a very common saying, and I say that India will not make in a day. India is moving towards it, and with the vision of our Honorable Prime Minister Modi ji and his team, I think it's happening. We can see the excitement, and give India a few years, and the world is looking at China plus one strategy, and we all should be proud that India is that plus one. So I think we should. There's a $300 billion target which the government has, right, for electronics manufacturing. Once we start manufacturing in India, it becomes easier to export out of India. So from Make in India for the world, that's the new dream, and we are all dreaming that, right?
Correct. You spoke about domestic manufacturing and how that will get a strong fillip. I want to understand from you, before the Dixon JV, what was the status of domestic manufacturing for you? And now at a point, where has it reached and what's the target going forward?
Before that, we were using a lot of EMS players. We used to work with Foxconn. We still do. I used to work with VVDN. So there, even Dixon, we were working already as an EMS partner. So EMS तो चल रही है. It's not that it's going to end. Our supply is, we need more supply. Our demand is much more than our supply. And these are this factory which we are opening soon, the JV. That will start. अभी क्या है ना, इंडिया में फैक्ट्री का प्रॉब्लम क्या है, वो आप बनाओ उनके साथ और वो किसी और के लिए बनाने लगते हैं. Right? We don't want to own that. It's not that people know how to do manufacturing of audio. It's a tough space. And we were the first ones. We are the first factory in India to do that, right? And we are always the first to do a lot of things. So,
how much of your total production is domestically manufactured and how much?
So it was 0 2 years back, and now we are at 60 to 70%.
With the new schemes coming, Make in India, Digital India, I see a surge in the applications, surge in the manufacturing. When we started, the volume of business or visibility was much less, and we are at a good position to say today the manufacturing sector has really picked up in a big way, thanks to the EV revolution, automotive,
Correct.
thanks to the consumers, thanks to the many electronics. Overall industry looks very bright, lot more manufacturing happening. There's a very high potential. Whatever we make also may go outside the country. In summary, Accord is a GNSS-centric Center of Excellence company. Have wonderful people with a long-term commitment, designing, developing, working, plus a lot of young people, a lot of energy.
So what particularly stood out for me was the association with ISRO as well, as far as the RNSS service is concerned. Help us understand what is this application that you put. In fact, you were one of the first companies in this stream of business to have that association. What exactly was the application and how did this partnership go?
Okay. To put it, what we develop is a global navigation satellite system. Means we develop a receiver portion. But in India, the satellites which beam these signals are designed by ISRO, launched by ISRO, and maintained by ISRO. What we call it is a space segment is controlled by ISRO. Control segment is controlled by ISRO. So we were very fortunate to associate very early on in Indian NAVIC program. While they are defining the signal structure, we designed the simulators, we designed the ground systems, we gave the reference receivers.
As far as your line of business is concerned, you don't have the support coming from either production-linked incentive or design-linked incentive from the government. In that case, what kind of support on the financial side is the government providing to a strategically important business like yours? And what would you seek beyond what is being provided from the government?
Yeah, thank you for this wonderful question. See, we are one of the early companies. When we started, none of the schemes were existing.
Correct.
I would not blame them. And we were on our own. So what we did is, with our earlier generation chip, we started addressing our own niche markets. We went ahead supplying, using our chips, certain modules to end customers, building some products and selling to customers, maybe in vehicle tracking, automotive, or supplying to various other customers. So that generated some amount of revenue. Around 2019, Government of India, under Ministry of Electronics, they thought of a RFQ scheme, and they floated a scheme under which it is a outcome-based incentive, meaning you make and deploy real chips.
Correct.
For that, they'll give some support. That means you have to absorb all your development cost, tape-out cost, manufacturing, everything. In recognition of that, they will give you a support. So, which is fine. We accepted condition. See, any encouragement is a good encouragement.
Absolutely.
When we set out, we never expected. When this came, it was very helpful.
From startups looking to innovate to the people who will actually power these innovations, venture capitalists are now opening up their wallets to fund semiconductor startups more than ever before.
We have written several checks, such as Incore and Mindgrove, these are two semiconductor companies where we invested over the last 2 years. And we are putting money where our mouth is. We think that these will drive towards very, very large exits and definitely not mid-scale acquisitions.
Right. Fair enough. And, I want to talk about growth capital as well. While there are VCs like you that are ready to write the big checks, my understanding is that it takes a lot of time before a semiconductor startup actually starts to even make money, right? Forget about profits and all of that later. Then how do you then solve for that growth capital issue? Is that something that is also changing, that VCs are also being more accepting about opening up their wallets?
I think so. I think while in semiconductors, the timelines get stretched just because these are deep technical companies to build out. And they do require patient capital. And I think over the last decade or so, capital has not become a problem. India, if there's the opportunity and everything, global capital, local capital, it all flows in. Now, we are very patient in understanding how the life cycle of a semiconductor company works, a startup works. And we are very willing to walk with them on this usually very interesting journey.
Certainly, semiconductor is a 50, 60-year-old industry by itself, right? It has taken these many years to evolve. So there are diverse pools of capital beyond traditional, venture capital and seed stage funds. Semiconductor companies themselves invest like us and Micron and others. So they are all very active in investing in their own semiconductor startups. Correct. So there is a lot more capital that seems to be available than what you have seen so far. But that is only dependent on once the company hits milestones, they start showing that they're truly innovative IP or designs that they have, then capital is not an issue in my view. Certainly not this day and age.
Sir, you spoke about how optimistic you are on the Indian semiconductor sector. Could you substantiate that with some numbers, just so that there's a better understanding in terms of the size that we're looking at?
Yeah. So I would say, if you exclude all the MNCs which have their design services here or their operations here, just the pure revenues of Indian semiconductor companies would be, in the order of tens or if not hundreds of millions of dollars today. And these are the companies which are already doing some stuff. Some very innovative stuff is happening in defense, right? For not just for India, but for others, defense companies, Indian companies selling to defense companies elsewhere. So all of this is just going to take a boost, in the next few years. And I would say it should be close to $1 billion in 5 to 7 years.
It's no different, actually. You look at an edtech company in India, they've raised billions of dollars, right? I mean, you look at quick grocery companies, they've raised billions of dollars. And you look at cab companies, they've raised billions of dollars. So for a deep technology company, is it not a fair ask to be able to go raise $300-400 million? I don't think that's really a problem. I think it's just really about entrepreneurs and the early investors connecting the dots with upstream capital. So upstream capital, growth capital, still there's dearth for deep tech startups. And that's where, at least I was obviously requesting the government that while you have, seeded the market, right, through accelerators and obviously incubators and creating capacity going to educational institutions, maybe as these companies graduate, there's enough seed capital for them and maybe even Series A capital, but where will you get the Series B and C, which is very critical for them to cross the valley of death, right? Cross the chasm and get to the next level. But to me, I think there's enough capital in Singapore or London or Silicon Valley, that's really looking for great ideas. And so it's the onus on folks like us and the entrepreneur to go connect the dots.
Risk capital and finding the right talent may be a challenge for semiconductor startups in India currently. But the opportunity to find end-use applications currently in the Indian market is massive. And with government support through schemes like DLI, India is not far from becoming an entrepreneurial powerhouse for the global semiconductor sector. In Gandhinagar with Yash Jain, Shilpa Ranipeta.
Well, that was all the startup action from the 3-day Semicon India Summit. It's now time for us to head into a short break. We'll be back with more news on startups. Stay tuned.